You know what? It's so funny actually, guys, but so many times I start thinking about, did my team made a reservation in my favorite place?
I think there is nothing like when you call someone like champion, when you hear the champion, it's like, how can I actually...
Thousands of Filipino flags. A roar that nobody inside that arena saw coming, for a player who was never even supposed to be there. And Stuttgart, Germany hasn't even begun yet, April 13th. The Porsche Tennis Grand Prix. And before a single ball is struck, before a single point is played, something already feels completely different. A 20-year-old from Manila, ranked 45th in the world, nowhere close to the top seeds, walks into one of European tennis's most historic and prestigious events. Not through dominance, not through expectation, but through a door that cracked open purely by accident. Olympic champion Zheng Qinwen pulls out with an injury and Alexandra Eala steps in as a last-minute replacement. On paper, that reads like a scheduling footnote, the kind of administrative detail buried in a press release that nobody reads twice. But here is what actually happened next, and this is where it gets interesting. Stuttgart's official tournament announcement didn't treat it like a footnote at all. The language they chose wasn't routine, it wasn't dry or administrative. It actually communicated that fans could now look forward to seeing Alexandra step in. Sit with that for a moment. Tournament communications are written by professionals whose entire job is to carefully manage perception and control messaging at every level. They do not casually position a last-minute replacement as a must-see attraction unless they already know something is building. That word choice was completely deliberate, and it told you everything about what the organizers saw coming long before the public did. Within hours of that announcement, Filipino communities scattered across Europe began mobilizing, travel plans locked in overnight. Group chats exploded, flags were ordered. Tickets were being purchased in coordinated waves across multiple cities and countries. What had started months earlier in smaller tournaments had grown into something genuinely continental. And now it was arriving in Germany, inside one of the most tradition-rich weeks on the entire WTA calendar. So before we even talk about what happens on the court, ask yourself this: when was the last time a 45th ranked replacement player triggered that kind of response across an entire continent before the tournament even started?
Everyone, I'm so excited to be back. Can't wait to be out on court, and I hope...
Now let's talk about who isn't here. Because sometimes the absence tells a far more powerful story than the arrival itself. Aryna Sabalenka, world number 1, multiple-time Stuttgart finalist, one of the most physically overwhelming players in the history of women's tennis. She has reached the final at this specific tournament 4 times, 4 finals, and she has never once lifted that trophy. The most recent loss came in the 2025 final against Jelena Ostapenko, and now in 2026, she isn't even in the draw. Gone entirely, and yet somehow, Sabalenka is still completely central to this conversation. Because in the weeks leading into Stuttgart, former ATP players Sam Querrey and Steve Johnson asked a question on their podcast that spread through the entire tennis world almost instantly. Querrey put it plainly: is Eala bigger than Sabalenka right now? Is she bigger than Coco Gauff? Johnson answered without a single moment of hesitation. No hedging, no diplomatic softening, no careful qualification. A direct, clean, unqualified yes. Now here is why that matters far beyond whatever reaction it triggered online. Steve Johnson is not a media personality chasing controversy for engagement. He is a former top 10 player. Someone who has physically stood inside a match and felt what real crowd energy does to a tennis court from the inside. When someone with that specific background makes that kind of statement, the tennis world cannot brush it aside. Jack Sock went even further. He framed this shift not as hype or manufactured social media noise, but as measurable, trackable audience behavior. And then he pointed towards something much larger than any single ranking number. A nation of over 100 million people. A country with enormous sporting passion and culture baked deeply into its identity. And until very recently, no consistent representation whatsoever at the elite level of women's tennis. That gap has now closed. And the tennis world is still processing exactly what that means. Eala is the first genuine global reference point for Filipino women's tennis on the stages that actually matter. Sabalenka represents Belarus. Coco Gauff carries one of the most passionate fan bases in all of American sports. Iga Swiatek has an entire nation standing behind her in Poland. But Eala's situation is structurally different from every single one of them. What is following her is not regional enthusiasm from a small pocket of supporters. It is a global diaspora and a long underserved national audience finally seeing itself reflected at the highest level of the sport for the very first time. That specific combination creates a scale of attention that established tennis markets simply cannot replicate, and that is precisely why this conversation caught so many people inside the sport completely off guard. But here is where honesty has to walk into the room, because attention and results are two entirely different things. And on clay, the distance between those two realities is exactly where Eala's real test begins. Everything that made her 2025 and early 2026 so electric happened on hard courts: Miami, Dubai, Indian Wells. Fast surfaces, aggressive tempo, early ball striking. Conditions perfectly built for the natural shape of her game. Clay is a completely different world. The ball behaves differently, rallies stretch longer. The physical demands compound over time. The tactical patience required is something that takes years, not weeks, to genuinely develop. And here is the part that should make every Eala supporter pay close attention right now. Her 2026 clay season opened in Linz with a controlled, efficient win over Grabber, composed and professional. But that result didn't answer the question that actually matters. Then came Jelena Ostapenko, former French Open champion, the defending Stuttgart title holder, a player whose fearless, almost reckless power makes her dangerous to top 10 opponents on any surface on any given day. Eala led 4-2 inches the first set. She surged to 5-1 inch the second. From that position, at least 3 sets felt like a certainty. It looked like a statement win assembling itself in real time. Instead, Ostapenko dismantled it completely. Final score, 6-4, 7-5. That result carries real weight, and here is exactly why. It means Eala walks into Stuttgart not riding momentum but carrying the fresh memory of a match that exposed genuine vulnerabilities on clay. Gaps in point construction. Gaps in managing momentum swings against experienced opponents who are built specifically to thrive in chaos. And Ostapenko is also sitting right there in the Stuttgart draw. The overall head-to-head still favors Eala, 2 wins to 1. But Ostapenko now owns the most recent win on the surface that matters most right now. That is a psychological blueprint, a solved problem already inside the bracket before the first round even begins. So the question you have to ask is simple. Does Eala have an answer this time? At the Miami Open, she was asked directly how she prepares for players who are physically stronger or more powerful than her. Her answer was striking in its clarity. She said everything she does is designed to prepare for exactly those players. That she is still actively in the process of getting stronger. That level of self-awareness at 20 years old is genuinely rare. Most players that age are still figuring out who they are inside a competitive match. She already knows precisely where the gaps are. But self-awareness, as impressive as it is, does not win matches on indoor clay against Grand Slam champions who have spent years mastering every bounce and slide that surface can produce. Results do. And Stuttgart demands results from the very first round. Here is what is already guaranteed before a single match is played. The crowd will show up, the Filipino flags will fill that arena, the atmosphere will be electric from the moment she walks on court. But tennis beneath all of that noise is brutally honest. The player standing at that baseline has to justify every single bit of it with every shot she hits. And this week, the draw offers her absolutely no room to ease into that pressure. Stuttgart sits on the calendar between Linz and Madrid. A bridge between adaptation and expectation. Between potential and proof. For a player still actively building her clay game, every match here carries weight that extends far beyond the scoreline. But there is another dimension to this week that goes beyond surface questions entirely. This is her debut on German soil. Her first appearance in front of a European crowd that has been primed for months through viral moments, podcast debates, and continental diaspora organizing that was already in motion long before she landed. German tennis crowds are informed, selective, and passionate in a way that has to be earned through actual performance on the court, not through what was promised before it. And yet the tournament's own messaging already signaled something different was coming, framing her arrival not as a gap filled in the schedule but as something worth genuinely anticipating. That kind of anticipation drops her directly into one of tennis's oldest and most unforgiving questions. Can the player actually match the moment when it arrives? The Stuttgart draw answers that question with zero generosity. Elena Rybakina, Coco Gauff, Iga Swiatek, Jasmine Paolini, Mira Andreeva, Karolina Muchova, and the defending champion Ostapenko. There are no soft rounds buried anywhere in this bracket. No gifts. Every single win is a statement. Every result carries meaning beyond the numbers. A deep run here, a quarterfinal, a semifinal, anything beyond that, would accomplish something that no hard-court success has fully confirmed yet. It would prove that her clay weaknesses are being actively solved rather than just honestly acknowledged. It would move her from a rising story the tennis world is watching to a legitimate French Open contender the tennis world has to specifically prepare for. And if that happens in Stuttgart, in Germany, in front of crowds embracing her in a way this sport hasn't witnessed in years, on the same courts where Sabalenka reached 4 finals and never won once, the story almost writes itself. Almost. Because tennis has never rewarded perfect narratives and it is not about to start now. Ostapenko already demonstrated that in Linz when every indicator pointed toward one outcome and she dragged the match somewhere else entirely through sheer refusal to accept what the scoreboard was suggesting. Clay does not care about crowd size. It does not care about global attention, viral moments, diaspora flags, or the scale of the conversation surrounding a player. It cares about timing, footwork, physical endurance, and the very specific ability to construct points under sustained pressure against opponents who have spent years learning this surface at its most demanding. Eala understands this. Her team understands this. The training block at the Rafa Nadal Academy specifically before this clay swing was not routine preparation. It was deliberately targeted at the longer rallies, the heavier physical load, and the tactical patience clay demands from anyone who wants to compete seriously on it. That kind of investment behind closed doors tells you everything about how seriously this challenge is being approached. Stuttgart is not simply another stop on the schedule. It is the precise moment where everything either becomes real or gets interrupted entirely. Where all of it, the crowds, the conversations, the flags, the podcast debates, the tournament messaging, the continental mobilization of a diaspora, either gets validated by what happens inside those matches or gets separated from it by the cold honesty of the scoreboard. The crowd will roar the second she walks out onto that court. The arena will feel different from anything Stuttgart has hosted in recent memory. The flags will be everywhere. But somewhere on that indoor clay, against opponents who have been here before and understand exactly what winning here actually costs, a 2-0 year old from Manila is going to face the only question that has ever mattered in professional tennis.